Union Mulberry Drainage Project coming through water pollution control. Mr. James.
Yes, I think all of the changes now that have been requested by the contractor are now in, and I'm going to yield some time to Ms. Denise Cruz. I see that she's nicely passed out a description of all the changes that possibly occurred to this. So, Denise?
Good evening. So let me start by saying that claims are not bad things. Claims are just a natural process of the contract documents, but at some point we have to settle up with extra costs that the contractor has incurred due to changes that we've made in the field. So change order 3 is a summary of all of those claims. This is in addition to the change order that we approved last year that added additional gas line lowering. So all of these really relate to conflicts that we had in the field, either with a gas service, a sanitary service, a water service, or in some cases, the Trans-Canada gas line, which was not in the location or the depth that they told us it was. So change order 3 is $220,310.47. Change order 4 is just the correction of all the quantities, what they installed versus what they bid. It is actually a deduct order of $13,702.68. This is the last paperwork I need to close out this project, so the contractor would like to get their final payment request in, so they would appreciate it if you could suspend and pass tonight.
Mr. James?
You might also add that Truco is the contractor that's done this for us. And how does it stand with our budget?
This is actually below the budget, although it was higher than what you authorized the contract for. That's because their bid came in lower than what we initially budgeted, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so just to make sure I got the figures right, we have one change order for $220,310.47, correct?
Yes, correct.
And the change order number 4, is that for additional money?
That is a deduct.
That's a deduct, okay. I knew I had something wrong.
No, it's, I asked for not to exceed $220,310.47 because we were still working on the change order number. So I knew it wouldn't be any higher than that.
Gotcha.
With the deduct.
Okay, all right. Thank you for clearing that up. Okay, any other questions for Denise? Mr. James, I have Mr. Hall as your second.
I might ask Becky to stand in on that in the absence of Orman.
He will be here, he'll just be a little late.
Okay. All right. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and suspension.
Yes, and suspension. That's correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to temporary resolution 45-21. This is coming through finance, and it is a resolution to approve the collective bargaining agreement that is effective from January 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2023 for the firefighters, Local 291. Mr. Martin.
So, members of council, just want to mention some of the highlights from the agreement that we've reached with our firefighters. Understanding that one of the great things I think I'm really encouraged, the mayor and I are very pleased about some of the changes they agreed to, because in our police and our fire, we're having a difficult time hiring new employees. And I think it's going to be sustained for quite a while with that difficulty, seeing all the other agencies around. So some of the things that we're doing here just to kind of brings it up to some of the things that we are providing with police, and vacation issue is really what we provide throughout the city. Article 19, we are going to open the opportunity to hire a firefighter with only an EMT, and this was a tremendous agreement with our union to sit there and say if they can obtain a paramedic certification within 36 months, then we will retain them after that. And so they would bump into that other pay range. That's a big deal. I can't tell you, it was a wonderful experience to work with them on something to be very workable. I don't think we're gonna see that many firefighters with paramedics to reach the levels we need to get to. So we will have to do training for these people. We do some of that with our police department as well, but to go through a paramedic program could be up to 18 months. And so we're working with that. Article 21, those pay raises reflect what we did in the police department. We have found that in both our safety forces, we are clearly well below where I think we should be. So we also gave them a 5-5-5 pay raises for the next 3 years. And that still will not put us to the levels. As closer you go to Columbus, of course, higher those amounts go. But I think this will help in not only appealing to people to work for our fire department, but also to retain them. And then if this contract is executed tonight, I'm hoping that you will pass it on first reading. We will work that out to where they'll get a $500 EMS bonus as the last ingredient to us settling this contract. One of the big things we changed, and I think it was great to have the union involved with this as well, is we're changing the language to allow new hires that if a full, complete year of service in a full-time position in another agency, we'll give a one-for-one years of service to help them obtain that step increase to be very competitive and help with our retention. Our current contract is if you have 2 years in another agency, we'll give you 1 year for those 2 years. We also worked on Article 26 with the comp time, allowing it to accrue up to 200 hours instead of 100 hours. Especially now with so much use of overtime, that's a real benefit for us. And I actually think we're going to have some overtime issues for significantly a while, both in our PD and our FD as well. Article 28,
I have a
we
question on
increased
26.
$900.
Paul.
Yes.
Paul, can we stop you for a second?
Yeah.
Question on Article 26.
Okay.
So is that, I mean, what if someone retires and has a bank of 200 hours of compensatory time?
So after you go so many years, or so much time, I don't think it's pensionable, if I can understand your question.
No, my question is it payoutable?
Yes, anytime anybody has comp time, whenever they leave, we have to pay that out. That's correct.
So you consider this a win?
Well, when you see
I
what
don't.
we're struggling with right now with overtime.
no.
Yes, yes.
So,
And really, it reflects what we see in our other union contracts. ASME, as well as the other ones, are already at a 200-hour limit.
So-
Fire was already at 100 hours in that limit.
well, no, but my concern isn't the number, it's the fact that they can bank it forever. Take 200 hours and you multiply it times someone that's retiring, that's a big nut. That's that's what? That's a month and a half of pay.
If I may. It was unlimited at one time, several years ago. The city got it back to 80 at PD and fire, I assume. What I saw before I left PD is officers are using that time at PD. They're not banking it. It's a different generation. Sure, some could, and that would be a $200 or 200-hour cash out when they retire, but many are using it for time off, which is really a change in the way older officers operated. Older officers would cash it out. Newer generation is not cashing out nearly as much comp time as the older generation.
But then again, so they take this in lieu of their paid time off, right?
Correct.
There are other, they're,
It's at the officer's, the employee's discretion. They take comp time overtime, and then they bank it, and then use it at a later date and/or cash some out.
Mr. Matlin?
So the difference in the fire department, the chief is back there if he wants to better explain it, is because of minimum manning, you just can't come in and say, I want comp time today. So if they build comp time, they work an overtime shift and choose to take comp time instead of overtime pay, they can't just take it another day. They've got to have minimum manning on staff. So
Sure.
because
PD's
we're
the
in
same way.
overtime all the time, it's really hard for these guys to take the comp time at any day, whether it's a day they want it or not. They just can't get it at all. And with the old agreement, which is 180 days, if they don't use it within 6 months, they get paid for it. This just extends it out, and it gives the city an opportunity not to pay it out if they can get time in. And with the possibility of hiring some more people, I think these guys, what they're wanting to do is maybe bank some comp time and hope to get enough staff on that at a later date, they can take it without that 6-month issue. So it's true, 200 hours, they could bank it and get paid for it when they retire.
So
But
let me finish my follow-up then Mr. Martin, are you telling me that this now aligns all three unions to be the same? Is that what I heard you start to say?
Yes, I'm trying to remember what we did for police. I thought it was at 200. I'd have to check. I know ASME is currently at 200. And one of the important things that Councilman McDaniel said, people are wanting to take the time off more so than cash it in.
I'm not arguing that point.
Okay.
I'm looking at it from
Correct.
dollars and cents. So I just want to know
It's the
if
same
in this case, if in any of these articles that aligns you with other labor unions, that would be helpful to know. Because if this is a pull-up to get everyone on the same plane, I'm okay with that. That if you would say, hey, to align
Yeah.
with the other collective bargaining units, we have, changed Article 26 to be I'm okay with that.
So I can verify that in a few minutes.
Okay.
But that was my goal going into this contract, to not surpass anybody, but more across the board. You'll see that in the vacation one as well.
Sure.
Where you've got that extra week at 5 years instead of 8. So that's one of the things. But that was one of the things I would not negotiate higher above what we have elsewhere, because you know the ripple effect on that.
No,
takes.
I'm fine. So
Yeah.
my points are twofold. All right, if this is getting everyone aligned to the same plane, great, because then that makes your contract negotiations in future years even, less hard,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
But more importantly, and then I put on the finance hat, and I think, okay, well, how much is this gonna cost me when you cash that out in the end? Because, there's $960 plus a quarter of every hour type situation. So
Plus
I was just from a dollars and cents perspective.
Vacations and everything go into that final cash out too.
Yeah.
Councilman Stokely, just if this would help, when anything is paid out of that nature, you don't pay the employer pension on it, so it's non-pensionable. So on fire, you would not be paying 24% of that. So that's a cost savings
It's the same,
there.
yeah.
Same thing, anybody, whether it be PERS or whatever, when you do a lump sum payout at time of their leaving or retirement, that is non-pensionable, which saves the city the employer cost.
Well, it does, but then they're gonna cash in their compensatory time before they ever use their real pensionable
Right, I mean, so when
vacation
they
time.
use it for time off, yes, then you pay for everything.
yeah.
So I'm just giving you the different.
I got it. Thank you.
So give me a few minutes and I'll figure that out. But
Sure.
let me finish this, and I actually have it in the cloud here, so I'll be able to check.
Okay.
That. So the 200 hours, and we are in a culture where people would rather have the time off. And there's other reasons there without going into that. Uniform allowance, yes, we brought that up to the same as PD. Vacations,
Was that number 28, uniform?
that's Article 28.
Okay.
And I actually did quite a bit of investigation on both the police and the fire side and found that that was justified. You're not gonna be surprised, but there is a lot of cost, not just in uniforms, but the other things that they personally buy. And, so vacation equalizes what's across the city. Health insurance, which puts them into the medical plan and dental plan, insurance plan that we want, that we're going across the board. And that is our life insurance. We increase that to, instead of 26,000, it's 50,000 for loss of life of one of our employees. Holidays and personal days, we clarified some language on Kelly Day. We weren't really having an issue there, but anytime you can take an opportunity to clarify language if there's some disagreement. But that really, hopefully, our new language doesn't create any issues. That's the other risk you always have. Employees who work at least 8 hours on a 24-hour holiday shift will receive double time for those hours worked. Previously, you had to work 16 hours, but we found from a scheduling purpose that, take example, you're done at 7 o'clock in the morning on Christmas Day, you got regular time for the day prior to 7, but then you have to work the next 8 hours of Christmas Day. So those who are asked to come in, because we're in so much overtime, this is where it's important. And someone senior might say, I'll choose not to work, so it's left with those who are less senior. And so to say, I gotta work 16 hours to get double time. So we felt like it was a fair request, and we negotiated to agree to that, treating them fairly on that day. If we got up to the staffing we want, a lot of this OT and other comp time issues probably would decrease, but sorry to say, it might take quite a while to get police and fire where we want to. We're very much competing out there. If you have any other questions, let me know. I'll try to research on that one question, Mr. Stover.
I saw Mrs. Teener first, so.
I did want to ask a question. So we got this Friday, right? And I thought it said 3 readings, and now it's saying 1. Am I right? Was it 3
on the-
readings?
What I was told was 1, so I was gonna ask for clarification on that as well.
Because I thought I don't know why, but I thought it was 3 readings, someplace, something I saw, and then we get it Friday, and it's kind of hard to.
So, we just wrapped this up, and we try to put it as fast as we can forward to you. But we're dealing with retro pay and trying to submit our status change. You do have a right to go to a second reading. It just means we'll delay when that pay raise occurs, and then it also means it's gonna adjust the retro pay that we're gonna pay. So, that's why on this one, I would ask you to go in first reading so we can benefit them. We currently had a new employee, we swore him in this morning. The mayor helped us out on that and swore him in, and we've got some others on the agenda. We are actively in the process of getting people. And I would like to say we have an authorized contract. It's not just taking care of those that are working for us, but it's also being very appealing to those that we're going through our list with.
Okay, Mrs. Bobbitt, you're next.
So in other words, if it's approved tonight, you can look at somebody and say, listen, I know you're gonna be getting a 5% raise. I get that. Can you explain a little bit more about this $500 EMS bonus?
So that came to the very end of our negotiations, where, without going through all the processes of that, we just ended up hinging right here. The mayor and we held firm at 555. And so, without telling you how they negotiated, we came up and we agreed here to settle this contract right there. And in essence, give them a $500 one-time stipend for being an EMS person in the department.
And everybody's EMS right now?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So, I'm not gonna tell you what they were requesting, but we did not give them what they were requesting, but we settled with this. If I can just leave it at that.
Okay.
If that's understandable there.
Okay, Mr. Matlin.
So, did the union already vote on this?
Yes.
So if we pass it tonight, it's a done deal?
Yes.
Okay.
And they were very timely in that vote, Councilman Matlin. I was very pleased about that. We only have this one to offer. We're still in negotiations with ASME, and I don't see that coming forth right here quickly. Just to let you know, we don't have a meeting scheduled. Our next one's not even until April.
Mrs. Bobbitt.
Do you see ASME asking for a bonus? Just putting it out there.
I am not free to talk about that
Okay.
negotiations at this time.
Okay.
We have a pending police supervisor negotiations I'm not free to talk about, or ask me at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
That's fine, I understand.
Okay, are there any other questions regarding this resolution? Are there any, am I allowed to ask that? Are there any objections to one reading?
You can ask.
Are there any objections to one reading? Okay. We will ask for suspension. All right. Good discussion. Temporary Resolution 46-21. This is a resolution that will approve the engagement of a representative who will serve as an advocate before the Ohio Executive Branch, the Ohio General Assembly, and in federal matters. It is coming through finance. I'm going to defer to Mayor Scheffler, who can hopefully provide some context.
Yeah, this resolution is a result of the recent capital budget, and for the second capital budget in a row, the city of Lancaster got 0. Despite the fact that our #1 priority project was endorsed by Morpsey and the Columbus Partnership, who indicated that they had a 100% batting record for their endorsed projects being approved. And so in a postmortem with William Murdoch, the executive director of Morpsey, and two gentlemen from the Columbus Partnership, we noodled about why we were unsuccessful when most other central Ohio cities were getting hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars for their capital project requests. And I was told that we were the only city in central Ohio that did not have a lobbyist working for us at the State House, which was interesting to me. I had heard other mayors talking about their lobbyists, but I didn't know it was so pervasive that everybody had one. So we contacted Jim Murmas, who is the managing partner of the Junto Company. I've known Mr. Murmas for many years from my involvement in the Ohio Chamber of Commerce. He's very well known in Columbus, very well respected. He actually served in the Bush White House and also in various state positions, including in Governor Kasich's cabinet, along with Councilman Hall.
Actually, he preceded me in the Taft cabinet. He was
Oh, and
the
it was
youngest-
the Taft
he was the-
cabinet,
He was the
okay.
youngest, I think he holds the record of being the youngest cabinet director in the state of Ohio. He's an impressive guy.
So we have reached an agreement with him for a contract for $36,000 to be paid at $3,000 a month. And we're asking for one reading so he can get to work for us in Columbus as soon as possible. I don't know if, Councilman, you have anything to add about Mr. Murmas?
Well, I think Jim Mervis is a high-integrity person. I think that he is extremely well-connected, and I think that he would definitely be an effective asset from the standpoint of lobbying on behalf of the city of Lancaster with the General Assembly and with the executive branch.
President Ule.
I'll defer to Mr. Stoughton.
Okay.
I'll yield it back to you.
I'm just curious what other cities this gentleman's representing, if we know.
He does not represent any other cities because his policy is he will only represent one entity in each business sector.
That was my question, because I don't know how you argue for one and then the other and make
Right.
it work, so.
Right.
Thank you.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you. So you mentioned the state capital improvement budget, which I think is a biannual thing, right?
Right.
What other, talk about the other lobbying he'll do on our behalf, with the, what other potential purposes that, or lobbying efforts he can do on behalf of the city?
Yes, so, by the way, he was interviewed by Randall Ullum, Stephanie Hall, Linda Berge, and Service Safety Director Martin. On any number of issues that we might have up there, he also becomes aware of grants and funding available that we might not otherwise know about, that he can bring to us as a potential applicant. And, at any given time, we may have issues that we want to pursue in Columbus, and right off the top of my head, I can't think of one right this minute, but in any number of areas, both on the federal and state level.
So what do we pay to be a part of Morpsey?
Pardon me?
What do we pay to be a part of Morpsey?
It's just about $19,000 a year.
Yeah, so I look at this as just another tool in the toolbox, and it's not, incredibly expensive. If we certainly can get $36,000 on average more out of him in influence than otherwise, right?
Yes.
That's the simple math.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm good with it, by the way.
Yes, Mr. James.
Just one quick question. The $36,000 annual retainer, if that's what you want to call it,
Mhm.
if he brings a lot of things to us, is there anything in the contract that gives
No,
him a?
there's no contingencies, no.
That's it?
Right.
Okay.
Now, Obviously, he could ask us for a higher retainer in future years if he's very successful in bringing it.
And-
But that's subject to negotiation at that time.
And this contract's just for 1 year, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Mrs.
Mike,
Snow.
it's simple. If I could get Clerk Sandy to change the fund number in the preamble to 1001, it's just simple, because that's not the general fund stuff.
Okay. And you said this was a 1-year contract?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions on this resolution? Mr. Stoughton, I have you as my second.
Okay?
Okay.
Yep.
And we will ask for suspension. All right, are there any other resolutions tonight? Anything I missed? Yes, Mr. James?
You did not miss this, but I think we need to talk a little bit about one of the resolutions that has to do with our concentrate line. There was an email put out today by Denise Cruz. They did issue some requests for bids, and they've now extended that. So I'd like to yield some time to Denise to give us a little bit of a background on that, if we could, please.
Okay, I thought we were doing that during the regular meeting, but that's okay.
That'll give her a chance to leave if she wants to. I'm sorry about that.
That's okay.
All right, so temporary resolution 41-21 was to authorize the contract for the South Water Plant concentrate line improvement. And we had asked you to suspend the third reading and pass it tonight. Well, you know something's up when the contractor calls and says, can you extend the bid date? Which we did. Then the second contractor called and said, I won't be bidding on this because I can't reach the engineer's estimate. At which point, we knew we had a problem that was compounded by the cleaning line contractor who called and said, this is a contractor that our consultant had been working with, called and said, no, sorry, I won't be submitting quotes to contractors for this project. So we delayed the bid opening for 2 weeks, and we've stepped back to say, something's wrong here. We either need to improve our specifications and our plans to make contractors more comfortable with this, or we have to find another solution. You might remember a couple years ago, Mike Nixon had brought a contract in that we were going to have a contractor come in and use ice to clean the line, and he backed out at the last minute. So we've had the staff out taking pressure readings on the lines and looking at things. We're going to this week have a contractor out to do a little bit of exploratory work to see what we can come up with. So I'm going to ask you if you will go ahead and hold this over for third reading while we figure this out. I think we will go ahead and construct a portion of this project. We probably won't do the line cleaning, but we'll probably construct the Canal Street improvements, but things are changing daily on this.
Okay, does anybody have any questions? Yes, Mr. James?
Not so much a question as a comment. The plan they've now come up with will give us a little bit better idea of what kind of inclusions there might be in that line. And I think that's a pretty smart move on our part, to be honest with you.
Anybody else? Mrs. Bobbitt?
I'm a little bit confused on what the 2 weeks is going to get you, but, is this money gonna have to go up?
I don't know, because we haven't decided what the new scope's going to be. What I suspect will happen is that we will only bid a portion of the project, so the money will actually go down. But, like I said, this is changing daily, so
Okay.
sometime this week we'll have, I hope, an answer, and then we'll be able to make changes and keep going.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else on 41-21?
Thanks, Denise.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to departmental updates. Yes, Mr. Martin?
So just to follow up with Denise on that, you know, we're asking to go to third reading. It's possible we might take it off the table, hold it, or we might just remove it. There is still some unknowns we have there. In regards to your question, Mr. Stoughton, I am sorry, but I only have the last contract. The last contract says 100 hours for the PD, but I do not have access to it. So I cannot answer that question tonight.
Okay, thank you.
I can't remember all the details of all our negotiations. I got a lot going on, so sorry.
No worries.
I really am disappointed I don't have it here.
Well, you can be
Sorry.
disappointed in you, I'm okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Fowler.
Good evening, President, members, council. I want to give a brief update about the transfer station. As I believe probably most of you are aware, on my second day as superintendent, about 8 o'clock in the morning, the transfer had a major machine failure and breakdown. So we've been doing direct haul of all municipal waste out to Pine Grove. Today was the first day we were able to dump our trucks back at the transfer. We were still closed to the public. We will be back open to the public tomorrow. So if you're getting any calls, they can come to the transfer. It's back open. Myself and 3 others worked about 7 hours on Saturday, and we were able to get things done, packed out everything that was up at the transfer, and have it ready to go. So it's been definitely 2 weeks. On that Tuesday, I was even on the back of a truck throwing trash. Been out in my pickup numerous times helping the guys throw trash. So it's definitely been quite the learning curve in the first 2 weeks. But
Nothing
I'm glad.
like getting your broke in.
Yeah, definitely
week.
broke in, but I'm glad but I'm glad we've got it back ready to go, and hopefully we're gonna do some things to hopefully, I don't know that you'll ever eliminate a failure like that, but we can hopefully reduce something like that.
Mr. Stoughton.
Yeah, Mr. Martin, how long did it take Bill Burrows to break the transfer station? How many days?
He has not spoken to me since this happened, so. But, yeah, I mean, we rebuilt it, we found out I don't know, I took it apart, it was back in 2003 or 7, somewhere around there, but.
There's a push panel. It was the main unit that pushes trash out into the trailers. And there's a panel in there that's 22 foot long. And that panel actually, along with the cylinder that literally broke the end off of it, it also ripped, and we're talking I-beam constructed panel with 1/2-inch steel coated on it. It ripped the whole entire front panel off of it. So the guys said that they've actually never seen that happen before. They've had some damage to the panel, but nothing to that extent. So it may even be something that I'm going to at least entertain looking at the cost of building another push panel to have one there. And then we are getting a price on, I will have that cylinder repaired and back in stock, so we have that if we need it.
Have we checked security footage, make sure
Has
someone
Bill-
wasn't down there Monday night?
Has Bill turned his keys in?
John, you need to be really careful. That kind of
Boy,
stress
you
could
regret
cause you
coming to the
go-
podium, don't you?
It could cause you to go prematurely gray.
That's all right. Hey, Friday night I passed out, so anything's possible.
But I would say 2 days is probably a record.
Yeah, that was, it was
catastrophic
8
failure.
o'clock. I was here on the 8th and got introduced, and about 8:15 on the 9th. I got the good news.
You know, they say quit while you're ahead. You just might want to just back up and fall into a seat when you get a second.
Hey, it's got to be up from here, is what I say.
But I actually called Sean, I don't know what, a couple days after that, and he already had everything, and I knew, I just didn't know if he needed to bring anything to council, and we needed to money-wise
Yeah, I think at this
and that.
point, there's enough in those line items. We should be okay. We may, in fourth quarter, find that that may not be the case, so try to remember that if you see me, that, hey, because we actually, I'm very happy to say we got through it with minimal overtime. We were taking trucks out, and that's one of the reasons why Tuesday I was throwing, is to free up a driver so they could be going out, because we were rotating the personnel onto whatever truck was empty and then sending a driver out to get that pushed out, because I don't know if you realize, but multiple times a day, each one of those trucks dumps. It definitely doesn't fit any kind of a route in one truck. That's multiple times a day those things are dumping out, so.
Okay,
All right, thank you.
thank you.
Good evening. I'm hoping that you all received my email last week. From Transit, we are really excited to announce that we are actually finally starting our commuter service to Rickenbacker. This will be a, thank you. This will be a 6-month pilot that is being paid for by the Ohio Transit Partnership Program, so it's all state funding. It's a 6-month pilot. At the end of the 6 months, then we will submit to ODOT like we've done with all of our other pilot programs. We'll submit all the information to ODOT, and they will determine whether or not to make it a permanent service. So we are hoping that this becomes a fairly utilized program. We will have 2 routes in the morning. We'll currently only have 1 route in the afternoon because we are still trying to hire drivers. So if you know of anyone that would be interested in a part-time driving position with public transit, please send them our way, because if we can get a couple more drivers, we'll be able to add a couple more routes and still be within the allotted grant from the Ohio Transit Partnership Program. So with that, I just wanted to give you an update, and I'll take any questions.
If Sean keeps breaking stuff, he may need a job part-time.
Hey, I will say, Sean, on my first day, we had a major accident, like a half hour after I got into my very first day on the job, so I can totally relate with his stress level right now.
I'm going to call Mr. Hall because I saw his hand first.
I just was curious why we're going to transport to Rickenbacker and not Port Columbus.
Well, so we're doing Rickenbacker because it's employment related.
Okay.
We're going to the industrial park. We're actually, so Groveport has their own transit system that transports people to all of the different businesses inside the Rickenbacker Industrial Park. And so this is something we've been working on for about 6 years. They have thousands of jobs that are unfilled, and we have employers that contact us daily asking for transportation. So we will be actually transporting, we're going to have pickup stop here in Lancaster, the Go Bus that's in Carroll, the Village of Carroll, Violet Township, Pickerington, and then going to the Rickenbacker transfer point, where people can either get onto the CODA bus and ride the CODA lines, or they can get on that Groveport Rickenbacker area transit and then go for employment purposes inside of that Rickenbacker Industrial Park.
That's helpful, thank you, Karen.
Mr. James?
Carrie, this is not so much a question as a clarification. You do not need a CDL license to drive, correct?
That is correct.
Okay,
All of our buses are underneath the CDL threshold.
right, okay.
Is that a volunteer?
I've got a CDL.
Now, Sean needs CDL drivers.
We're hiring 2.
I have a CDL. Here we go.
You and me, same.
Oh, boy,
Boy,
have
there's
the
nothing
party
more I'd
here.
like to see is
Oh,
Becky
boy.
Teener behind a big old trash truck wheel.
It would be the
Lord help us.
party bus.
Yeah, jeez.
It would,
Mrs.
it would be the
Bobbitt.
real party bus.
Hope I remember my question. Doing it. So, a person, these employers have called you, and, they want this. Somebody in Lancaster, what time, because you mentioned, pick up in Lancaster, you mentioned Violet Township, and then over there to get on a CODA bus. If someone from Lancaster needs to be at work at 7 o'clock in the morning, when does that mean their morning is gonna start down here in Lancaster?
They're starting here around 5:30 in the morning.
5:30?
Yeah. And again, if any of you commute back and forth to Columbus, you'll know that cars aren't a whole lot quicker at this point. But because we are making 3 stops between Lancaster and Rickenbacker, it does add a little extra time.
Thank you.
So what time will the routes actually be?
So I did send out the schedule. I didn't bring it with me. I don't want to tell you
Oh.
incorrect,
Look
but
at the
we
email.
are going to have, our first bus will be leaving around 5:30 in the morning, and then we'll have another one that leaves about 45 minutes after that, because we find that most of the first shift buses or first shift people need to be there at those times, and those are the most popular shifts, according to the studies that have been done. Again, we worked with Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission on this. Fairfield County Economic Development, and several other community partners, the Ohio Means Jobs, Corey Clark here in town. So we've been working on this, like I said, for about 6 years. It took us that long to find funding to handle it. Oh, thanks. Auditor Nettles is covering me. So our first bus leaves at 5:26 in the morning, and then our second bus leaves at 7:15 in the morning. And then our afternoon route is 4 o'clock in the afternoon, is the only route that we have in the afternoon at this point until we can find more drivers. Thank you, Auditor Nettles.
Thank you.
It's always nice when somebody knows my job.
Mrs. Teener.
So I'm sorry, maybe you said this. So where are the pickup points in Lancaster?
So we're only stopping in one place in Lancaster because it is a commuter route. So the point is that we're not, we're trying to minimize the amount of stops so that, people don't have to
So
be
is it on
hostage on the bus
Wheeling
forever.
then?
So our only stop in Lancaster is going to be where the bus shelter is on West
Okay.
Wheeling across from Job and Family Services.
Okay.
We find that that's a really good spot within walking distance for a lot of people who are looking for jobs.
Okay. Any other questions?
I will say to Mr. Hall's question, if you are needing to get to the Columbus CMH airport, when we connect into the GO bus at the Dogwood Center in Carroll, they actually go to Columbus International.
That's
So
awesome.
there are potentials. So thank you. Thank you, Auditor Nettles.
Any other departmental updates? Okay, I will turn the floor over to President Wolf for tonight's meeting prep.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. We do have temporary ordinance 921, an ordinance to amend the codified ordinance for the fire department. This coming through law, Mr. Hall.
I'm sorry, you caught me off guard just a little bit. I'm going to defer to Stephanie to sort of update the council on that particular issue, please.
Sure. So as the Service Safety Director mentioned earlier, the fire department is having some difficulty with finding new firefighters to replace those that we are losing to attrition, whether it be retirement or other departments. And so the city has always maintained a hiring limit at the age of 30 years old to be a firefighter. And that's upheld by state and federal law because there is some information that physical fitness tends to fall off after that point, which is super depressing. But that was the justification for that number. And so the state of Ohio moved the number up to the age of 40 previously. But the city of Lancaster, in an attempt to kind of get in the middle there, thought that maybe if we moved it up to the age of 35, which is per the language of the code, you cannot be appointed on or after your 36th birthday, is how it's stated. We thought if we moved it up to that 35, we might be able to get more first-time firefighters to come and sit for the test, and then also potential lateral hires to come in as well. And this is all because eligibility for retirement as a firefighter is after 25 years. And so the goal is to get folks in the door and to have them be able to take on those physical capabilities while, age allows for that. So that's basically the reason for it. The SSD, as well as Chief Ward, both are in support, and I think Paul has something he'd like to add
And I just
as well.
add to that, we want to clarify the language that meant the original appointment could actually happen at another agency if they're full-time somewhere else. And that is some of the things that we're facing right now, trying to attract others. So we added some clarification language in there. You could start at a different agency at 28 years or 32 years old, and you'd still be eligible for us to consider.
And the sort of the big upshot of this, at least based on my conversation with Stephanie, is that if we hire people older than 35, we're going to end up with people in positions that aren't, where they're not able to do the physical labor that is required of people who are on the line and doing fire suppression kind of work. So it was kind of a balancing act between
Exactly.
going 35 to 40, and city government believes that this 35 is the sweet spot that we're going to be able to get the number of applicants that we need without compromising the workforce and putting people in positions where we don't need them.
Absolutely, dangerous positions, and yeah, for them, physically. We don't want to increase or, lead to further workplace injury for any of our firefighters.
Ms. Bobbitt?
Do we have a limit on the police officers?
There is no limit on police. No, ma'am.
Okay. How about, I think I can probably answer this myself. Somebody's been a firefighter in Columbus, Ohio for 10 years, and they come down to Lancaster, but they're 35 years old. Almost 36, they're 36 years old. We wouldn't hire them.
So if they've originally been appointed someplace else, as Paul was saying, we can still hire those folks. Yeah, the rule for the entire state of Ohio used to be under the age of 30, like I said. So most of the firefighters that are out there are still firefighters that started prior to the age of 30. So we'll still be able to capture all of those lateral hires potentially. And that was part of the reason for changing that language to say, if you've originally been appointed elsewhere, you can still come to the city of Lancaster as long as you were originally appointed before the age of 35.
Okay, I'm sorry you did say that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions or comments on this ordinance? Okay, Mr. Hall, what do we have this at here?
We haven't had this conversation, but I'm going to ask Becky to second this, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Thanks.
And 3 readings on this?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yes.
I think we ought to have at least 2. We actually put out a request to Tom Hammer to go ahead and let's start advertising for the next one. It coincides, I'd like to have that in place before we advertise for that next test. We only had 9 eligible names that we're working on the current list, and we're gonna probably have that exhausted pretty soon, but, first reading tonight, and we could give you an update next time. All right?
That'll
Thank
be
you.
fine. Good. Thank you very much. I will pass back to the chairman.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other items for finance?
Just a question. Since Sean broke the transfer station, do we need to jack the fees in ordinance 8, or do you want to leave it at
No.
$25?
No.
We should be fine.
All right.
I appreciate your concern.
Well, it's not open to the public till tomorrow.
Facebook will be blowing up tonight, Tom.
I know.
All right. Well, seeing no other items for finance, I will entertain a motion to adjourn for my last finance committee meeting.
I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.
That was too big of a smile.
The regular meeting of Lancaster City Council will begin at 6:55. What is wrong with my hammer?
Dagger Law has been part of the Lancaster community for more than 110 years. This is where we live and work. You'll see us at festivals, sporting events, and all around town. We consider our clients as friends, and we walk alongside you through challenging times. Whether you're a growing business, a changing family, facing litigation, planning your future, or dealing with land issues, we're right here. We are local. We are trusted. We are experienced. Dagger Law.
There is no place like Lancaster, Ohio and Fairfield County, and like you, I am proud to call them home. As a longtime resident of Lancaster and graduate of Lancaster High School, this community is important to me, and I want to provide superior customer service, professionalism, integrity, and honesty at the Connor Insurance Agency. I am committed to supporting local programs and projects through my volunteer work and board membership with several organizations. It has been a great honor to work with all the first responders throughout Lancaster, Fairfield County, and the state of Ohio to put on Kids and Cops Day, to be a part of Shop with a Cop alongside the Lancaster Police Department and JFS, and to help Lancaster Public Education Foundation raise funds to support our local public schools and teachers. These men and women work hard to protect and support our community, and I would like to take this moment to say thank you for all they do. My goal as a business owner and insurance agent is to provide my clients with the most appropriate services and coverage for their needs at a competitive rate. As an independent agent, I have several carriers to choose from so I can customize your insurance coverage to fit your needs and desires. I strive to make sure there are no gaps in your coverage that could be harmful, and just as important, that you are not overinsured. I look forward to serving your insurance needs now and in the future. At Connor Insurance, we are here to serve you by protecting what is important to you. Please contact my office at 740-654-2848 for a full list of services and carriers, or visit my website, ConnorInsuranceAgency.com.
Swing into the Carriage Company and check out our sweet deals.
If you're looking for the best selection of clean, quality used vehicles, look no further than the Carriage Company. You'll feel secure with your purchase, knowing all vehicles undergo an extensive safety and service check prior to the sale. And all vehicles can be viewed online at carriagecompany.com. The Carriage Company, located at 1031 North Memorial Drive in Lancaster.
So wait!
The Frankie Smith Funeral Home and Crematory in Lancaster and the Johnson Smith Funeral Home in Baltimore have a long and wonderful history of serving our community. Feel free to give us a call at 740-653-0652. Stop in and see us at either of our two locations, 405 North Columbus Street in Lancaster and 207 South Main Street in Baltimore. Respect for tradition, regard for change.
Is it time?
Second.
They got outscored 18-2 in the last.
Good evening. Welcome to Lancaster City Council. Please join me in a word of prayer. Father, we are thankful once again for your many, many blessings. Thank you for your grace and mercy and love. We thank you for the work that's set before us tonight. We ask that you would lead, guide, and direct us as we go about it. We also pray that you would continue to lead, guide, and protect the citizens of Lancaster and the employees of Lancaster, Father. May you continue to help us. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. I hereby call this meeting of Lancaster City Council to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt.
Here.
Mrs. Downhour.
Here.
Mr. Hall.
Here.
Mr. James.
Here.
Mr. Matlin.
Here.
Mr. McDaniel.
Here.
Mr. Schoonover.
Here.
Mr. Stoughton.
Here.
And Mrs. Teener.
Here.
Let the record reflect that all 9 members of Lancaster City Council are in attendance this evening. Reading and disposing of the journal.
I'd like to present the regular meeting minutes dated March 8th, 2021.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the journal.
Second.
A motion and a second to receive and file the journal. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Reports of city officials.
Email dated March 12th, 2021 regarding Utilities Department RFP question submitted by Superintendent Jenny Nixon. Email dated March 12th, 2021 regarding Utilities Department RFP question submitted by Mrs. Teener. Email dated March 15th, 2021 regarding Utilities Department RFP question submitted by Mrs. Bobbitt. Email dated March 16th, 2021 regarding public hearings submitted by Mrs. Teener. Email dated March 16th, 2021 regarding IT committee cancellation submitted by Mr. Stoughton. Email dated March 16, 2021 regarding economic development agenda submitted by Mr. McDaniel. Email dated March 17, 2021 regarding notice of funding availability submitted by Linda Disser, Executive Director of Community Development. Email dated March 22, 2021 regarding Finance Committee agenda submitted by Mrs. Downhour. And finally, an email dated March 22, 2021 regarding committee changes submitted by Mrs. Downhour.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of city officials.
Second.
A motion and a second to receive and file reports of city officials. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Are there any communications this evening?
There are notice to the legislative authority of the transfer of a liquor license from CSP Investments Lancaster LLC, doing business as Ted's Marathon, located at 182 East 6th Avenue, Lancaster, Ohio 43130, to Wilmot Petroleum LLC, doing business as Ted's Marathon, located at the same address, submitted by the Ohio Division of Liquor Control. Secondly, a notice to the legislative authority of a new liquor license to LOS Amigos of Lancaster, Inc., doing business as Los Amigos, located at 1348 Edie Road Northwest, Lancaster, Ohio, submitted by the Ohio Division of Liquor Control. And finally, a thank you card from Mary Green for the flowers for her husband's passing.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the communications.
Second.
A motion and a second to receive and file communications. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We do have a special presentation tonight, and so I'll invite Ms. Downhour to join me at the podium.
It's a long walk.
Well, as was discussed tonight during the Finance Committee meeting, it is Ms. Downhour's final meeting with us on Lancaster City Council, and I'll just say from a personal standpoint, it's been a great joy over these last few years to get to know you, Holly, and to serve together with you. And so on behalf of City Council, I'd like to present to you today this plaque that says, presented to Holly Miller Downhour, 5th Ward Representative, Lancaster City Council, January 1st, 2018 to March 26th, 2021, in honor of your service to the citizens of the city of Lancaster, presented by Lancaster City Council on this date. Thank you so much for your service. We appreciate all that you've done for the city. Thank you. Please feel free to.
gosh. It has been a very good learning opportunity to serve on council. I'm going to take this off so you guys can understand what I'm saying. I learned a lot over the last 3.5 years. I learned that, you come in with big hopes that you're going to be able to make and really affect change, and you quickly learn what your boundaries are. And sometimes that's difficult because a lot of people don't understand that. So I have enjoyed doing the finance committee with Tom. Tom has taught me a lot about budgets, and I know I'm always a pain about wanting that in Excel, but that's how you manipulate the numbers and get an understanding of it. But I have really enjoyed working with all of you and developing our friendships. So you may see me from time to time because I'm still going to be in the city for a little while. I'm now in Becky's ward, so look out. I may be calling you very often.
You should know how to figure everything out by now.
I should. But no, thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you very much to the citizens of Lancaster and those in the 5th Ward. I'm sure that my replacement will do very well, and depending on who that is, if they have any questions, don't hesitate to ask, and I'll be here if you need anything. All right? Thank you very much.
Are there any petitions or memorials this evening?
There are none to be presented.
During this time at Lancaster City Council, we set time aside to allow the voters and taxpayers of the city to address Lancaster City Council on any item or issue that you would like. Is there anyone here tonight who would like to address Lancaster City Council? As a taxpayer, ma'am? Well, okay, I'm not going to go through the whole spiel. You got 5 minutes. I think you're familiar. Okay. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Linda Berge-Disser. I live in the 5th Ward, and I just want to thank Mrs. Miller-Downhour for your service. And I just want to let you know that I've only been here for 2 years, and Holly was, not only was she my neighbor across the street, but she was so welcoming when I moved in. Invited me to the the Ohio State-Michigan game. And actually made me feel welcome while I was there, introduced me to the folks in the South End, took me to a block watch meeting. So it's been a pleasure as a taxpayer, as a resident, as a friend, and as a city employee to know you and to have you on the council. So I just want to thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Disser. Anybody else like to address Lancaster City Council this evening? Very good. Okay. Are there reports of standing committees tonight?
There is one. Finance Committee meeting dated March 8, 2021, submitted by Mrs. Downhour.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the standing committee reports.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to receive and file reports of standing committees. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Do we have reports of special committees?
There are none to be presented.
We have no public hearings tonight, so we'll move to the reading of resolutions, beginning with the third reading of temporary resolution 32-21.
A resolution authorizing the City of Lancaster to apply for the Meals on Wheels Older Adult Alternatives of Fairfield County, Inc., 2021 through 2022 grant, offered by Mr. Schoonover and seconded by Mr. James.
Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 3221.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 32-21. Mr. Schoonover.
Yeah, real quick, this is an annual piece giving our permission for transit to apply for a grant from Meals on Wheels.
Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary resolution 32-21 passes 9-0. Temporary resolution 34-21.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to advertise for bids for the Lateral D Phase 1 Trunk Sewer Project, offered by Mr. James, seconded by Mrs. Teener.
Mr. James.
Briefly, this is certainly something we need to help the new park and to enhance some of the things we need to have done out at the industrial park. So, Mr. President, at this time, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon our written record temporary resolution number 34-21.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 34-21. Discussion, Mr. James.
Nothing further, thank you.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit.
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour.
Yes.
Mr. Hall.
Yes.
Mr. James.
Yes.
Mr. Matlin.
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover.
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton.
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary resolution 34-21 passes 9-0. Temporary resolution 36-21.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate with the county auditor in the Parks and Recreation Fund 2012, offered by Mrs. Teener, seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Ms. Teener.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 36-21.
Second.
A motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 36-21. Discussion, Ms. Teener.
Yes, this is the Bowers property that was given to us for the parks, and we needed to change it from farm to park use. So they had taken money out of concessions to pay for that amount of $6,200, and the parks is just reimbursing the concessions.
Thank you very much. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit.
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour.
Yes.
Mr. Hall.
Yes.
Mr. James.
Yes.
Mr. Matlin.
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover.
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton.
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary resolution 36-21 passes 9-0. We're going to have second reading on temporary resolution 41-21.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the South Water Plant Concentrate Line Improvement Project, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mr. Hall.
Mr. James.
As we discussed in the Finance Committee meeting, there's been some changes that need to be made to the scope of work, and at this time, we're going to at least dispense with the 2 reading requirement and possibly go to 3 and maybe a removal at another time.
So what's your pleasure? Second reading.
This is a second reading.
Second reading on temporary resolution 41-21. Temporary resolution 42-21.
A resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the purchase of pipe and fitting for use by the Division of Water, offered by Mr. James, seconded by Mrs. Teener.
Mr. James.
Yes, Mr. President, this time I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of temporary resolution numbered 42-21.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading on temporary resolution 42-21. Discussion, Mr. James.
Just briefly, this is just replenishing the pipe supply that they'll need for projects of replacing water lines this year. And that's all I have to add for that.
Thank you very much. Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit.
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour.
Yes.
Mr. Hall.
Yes.
Mr. James.
Yes.
Mr. Matlin.
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover.
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton.
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 9-0. Mr. James.
Yes, Mr. President, this time I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon our written record temporary resolution numbered 42-21.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 42-21. Discussion, Mr. James.
Nothing further.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit.
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour.
Yes.
Mr. Hall.
Yes.
Mr. James.
Yes.
Mr. Matlin.
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover.
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton.
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary resolution 42-21 passes 9-0. We're now first reading on a series of resolutions, beginning with temporary resolution 44-21.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a change order for Union Mulberry Phase 3 Storm Sewer Project, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mr. Hall.
Mr. James.
Yes, Mr. President, this time I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution numbered 44-21.
Second?
A motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 44-21. Discussion, Mr. James.
We discussed this, the changes that needed to be made to this particular project in the Finance Committee meeting, and I think it was somewhat self-explanatory, so we'll go from there.
Okay. Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 9-0. Mr. James.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon our written record temporary resolution numbered 44-21.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 44-21. Discussion, Mr. James.
Nothing further.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary resolution 44-21 passes 9-0. Temporary resolution 45-21.
A resolution to approve a collective bargaining agreement between the City of Lancaster and the International Association of Firefighters, Local 291, with respect to compensation and other matters related to working conditions. Offered by Mrs. Downhour and seconded by Mrs. Bobbit.
Ms. Downhour.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of resolution temporarily numbered 45-21.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 45-21. Discussion, Ms. Downhour.
I will save it.
Discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 9-0. Ms. Downhour.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 45-21.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 45-21. Discussion, Ms. Downhour.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. This resolution came to us through the administration. It is for approval of the collective bargaining agreement that is effective from January 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2023. It has already been voted and approved on by the union. And they have asked us, because we have individuals that are getting ready to be looked at for hiring, that they can go to them and say that they have a contract with certain language in it. So we have been asked to suspend and pass this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Downhour. Is there further discussion on the motion? Mr. Stoughton.
So, Mr. Martin, I've heard the police contract only has 100 hours in it.
Yes.
So it seems to me.
I haven't got it confirmed, but someone else told me, maybe the same person told you.
Mhm. So my question is, and we already ratified the police contract, correct?
Yes.
So why did we deviate? I mean, I don't have a problem. I mean, I have no problem with the raises. I have no problem with, all the other structure, but now it seems like, that seems like a pretty rich benefit that's not in line with our other safety forces. And I can't help but think that police officers might feel a little angst about there being that kind of difference.
So, yes, ASME does have a 200-hour contract. I mean, we did talk about that one as well. 200 comp hours can be banked with ASME. The biggest issue that was very influential in this is the amount of overtime that we have, the desire to keep people wanting to work because they're more interested in banking some comp time to get more time off later when we get some people hired instead of taking the money right now. So there is, I'm going to reiterate what Chief McDaniel says. In this climate that we are now, 90% of our employees actually just prefer to look for time off instead of taking pay. Yes, that helps us financially for the immediate, but we felt like with the burden that is upon them to keep pushing down to you're going to work when it comes to the lower senior employees, there are some that are doing a lot of hours. And it's more appealing for the senior employees to say, hey, if I can get comp time off, be glad to be in the mix, and it's really an operational issue. Personally, I think when we get our manpower up, we'll never touch minimal manning 16 at all. I don't think we're gonna have much opportunity for overtime, and I felt like it would be operationally a big help at this time, and that was one of their requests.
Mr. Mayor?
So during negotiations, we were assured by Chief Ward, who unfortunately has departed at this point, and Assistant Chief Maffin, that once we get back up to strength, that there will be very little opportunity for overtime or comp time. Our full strength is 72. We are operating today at 59, which is the reason we have so much overtime. And I also believe there's a limit on how long this can be carried forward. So you can't earn it now and cash it in and, in 2027, I believe. Isn't that the case?
We had a 180-day limit, which is every 6 months, but we extended past that.
There's no
We
limit.
do not have a limit on that time.
Okay. But we were assured by Chief Ward that once we get our manpower back up, that overtime would not be an issue with the fire department. So this was kind of a non-cost item that we negotiated.
Well, you can't call it a non-cost item, because it can be cashed.
Well, because there won't be overtime.
And I
at
understand
point.
that. And when we get to, I have trust in our, the chiefs of both of our services, that they're not going to, obviously, and they never have. They've never been ones to go out there and just, spend money for the sake of spending that. Hell, they've never had it, for that matter. But at the end of the day, I mean, it just, it kind of seems disingenuous, because as you well know, you've been around long, well,
Yeah.
Paul, you've been around a long time.
Yeah.
You know how police and fire both look at those contracts. And I
Right.
can tell Mr. McDaniel and Mr. Matlin will be, they do look at them, and they do keep score. So,
Mr. McDaniel?
A couple of things to keep in mind. The cap is your 200 hour is your cap. It's your limit on what they can accrue. It does carry forward. So you would, if they get a 5% pay raise next year, it's worth 5% more than it was this year. That is the only cost, really, is the increase that they might get if they carry it over, because they would have gotten overtime if they got paid for it, would be the same dollar for dollar as the comp time.
no, I get it.
So you could have a small cost for carrying over. And you're absolutely right. I can promise you the police union's going to be looking at 200 hours.
Oh, yeah. It's a given for next contract.
Absolutely.
Yes, Ms. Bobbitt?
Is it safe to say, from what you've answered here, that right now, police don't have as many opportunities to get those comp hours as fire?
So police is at lowest numbers I can ever remember right now, as well as fire.
Because of the complement,
Right.
because of
So,
their complement right now.
But we don't, so it really, when I look at police and fire, they don't have as many opportunity. They're not forced into, we do have kind of a minimal staffing for police, but it's really intriguing. I don't want to take
You're
you
right.
through it, but certain shifts, certain days
Right.
have certain requirements. So it's a really great art. They're really wise in how they determine that. Where fire, it's different, trying to deliver that service so we have our minimal staffing. So you're required. So you go through the seniority and you work down at the bottom, and the bottoms are what's being forced. And it's me operationally seeing and this is the bottom line. I mean, it's not easy to get me to sway on some stuff, but I see possible burnout when I'm talking about people that personally have taken me to the hospital and other things that's happened with others. I'm very concerned about how many excessive hours they're working. Doing 24 hours, there are nights those paramedics might sleep 6 hours, I get that, but they're gonna go into 8, 16 hours the next day. And it's my effort to give that opportunity for operationally to try to give an incentive for more people to say, look, let's all carry the load. And I'm not saying they're not. And I'm not saying that the most senior, but it becomes very attractive, very appealing to say, I'm gonna take that comp time. That's how important comp time is, to get to that down the road where they can maybe take an extra week off or get a vacation day. It's really, really important. In all of our hires today, I see that true right now. I'm old now. In my day, when
No.
I was younger, I'm taking every bit of comp time and I'm taking all the money I can get.
Right.
And I'll work that 60, 70 hours. I don't see that today, and I'm not criticizing that. But I think when we talk about our level of care, it really was an operational decision. And I do believe there is a financial liability that we could have. But I don't have the stats here, but I'm telling you, it is a high end is taking that time off and not cashing it in. I'm not saying that never happens, but that is a legitimate question to ask to evaluate our financial liability on that.
Ms. Teener?
I have a question. I'm talking about how far down fire department, how far down police department? What numbers are they at?
Police Department, as of the end of last week, was at 58 out of 72.
Okay, so they work every day, 5 days a week, 8-hour shifts? So,
There's significant overtime with 58, I can promise you
Yes,
that.
it is. There is.
63 is probably the very least number to fulfill all the requirements of the job. 63 is where we were for many years.
Yeah.
So this number is way low, but there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes, there is.
Yeah, I saw a background investigation being finished up when I was in there yesterday, and it looked like a really good candidate. Hopefully, he'll be somebody you like. So,
Very good. Yes, Mr. Mallon?
I just want to make it clear, to get comp time, they have to work overtime. So they're earning this time, and they're choosing to not get paid the money with the possibility of some opportunity for time off later. So it's not like we're giving them anything. They're earning their overtime. The only difference in this, and it would be possible in today's, the way the overtime's going now, for somebody to earn that 200 hours of overtime in 180 days, and they could have got paid for it in a lump sum just with the old contract. All this does is allow them to hold on to that comp time and maybe get time off later in another year or a year after. And honestly, the difference of getting paid out at retirement when you don't have to pay the pension, the 24% on it, they could go through a couple raises and it'd still be less expensive for the city to pay it out at overtime than it would be had they taken it in overtime when they earned it, possibly.
Thank you,
Mr. President?
Yes, Mr.
Ju-
Long?
So essentially what you're saying, Jack, is that while we acknowledge this is a potential financial liability for the city, it could also end up saving the city money.
It'd be, to me, it's not a lot of money compared to what it costs to run a fire department. Yes, though, depending on how long they bank the time. If they earned this comp time 10 years before they retire, then it's going to cost more to pay it out at retirement.
So-
If they earned it 2 years before, no.
So given the fact that this may be a neutral cost to the city, and we know that we have some demands on our police force, does it make sense for us to consider making an accommodation so that there is a degree of equity between the two sides?
No, absolutely not.
No?
Let me tell you folks something, and I'm getting very irritated here, and I know you've all seen me irritated before. Nothing in any of these contracts was agreed to easily or quickly. All these contracts were negotiated with many, many hours in a whole team on our side, considering the financial ramifications. And if I remember this particular issue, between the time we went into caucus with our experts and the time we went back in, we spent an hour discussing this very issue. We went around and around. How much is it going to cost? Why are we doing it? What's the ramifications with the police union, with the police supervisors union? These things, this is one little piece of a giant contract that's like 40 pages long that many things in changed. And to nitpick one piece of this whole contract is kind of, I hate to say this, but narrow-minded. These things are very complicated. with a lot of financial ramifications, and they stand on their own. Police has other advantages that the fire doesn't have. Fire have some advantages police doesn't have. That's the way the system works. And I know everybody wants to be equal. Police wants to get everything fire has to want everything that the police has. And, you know, sometimes that's possible, sometimes it isn't. But this was not an easily agreed upon concession that we made. It was considered long and hard before we agreed to it.
So I'm going to give Mr. Stoughton an opportunity to respond. Go ahead, Mr. Stoughton.
Look, Mayor Scheffler, we didn't sit in part of negotiations. We now are considering the contract in the public as city council. So when we approve this contract, the contract then becomes binding. So this is our fiduciary responsibility to the city to ask these kinds of questions. All right, you may get irritated as opposed to mad about that, but you know, this is our duty, all right, to do this. And oh, by the way, we're only talking about one single facet of the contract, all right? We're not talking about every one of them, and it's our right, and this is what we're supposed to be doing, all right? I understand every negotiation is unique in and of itself, and I get that. But I don't think we should be excoriated for asking questions because we're not a part of the negotiations. We're a part of considering this on a first reading passage. Now, would you prefer that we wait a reading, get a better understanding, and pass it in 2 weeks?
I think what you said was key. It's one little piece of a very large financial package.
Exactly.
And all these little pieces are interrelated.
Agreed. But again, would you prefer that we get more information and wait 2 weeks, or you want us to do it now?
Absolutely not. You know, these people have been waiting on this raise for 3.5 months now, so we'd like to get it to them. We have trouble recruiting fire people and police officers, and we need to get this passed ASAP.
Sure. And remember, when the levy was out there, you know, we were trying to pass the levy, we all committed to being good stewards of the new money. You know, don't go out and spend it like, you know, drunken sailors, so to speak. And we're here just to ask questions. We've had good discussion about it, and you know, and I don't think anything that anyone said here was particularly out of line. They had, you know, even to Mr. Hall's point, you know, he's offering a different, just a different perspective, and that's what he was elected to do.
Thank you, Mr. Stoughton. Further discussion on the motion?
I would just echo what Tom said. I think he made some very good points, and it is our fiduciary responsibility to ask questions and to probe. At the end of the day, I think the mayor made some great points, but I also think that, you know, making points in the way that you did, Mayor, to essentially undermine us probing and asking questions is not the right way to engage in negotiations and conversations with your city council.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Hall. I'm ready to move on if you guys are. Is there a, we ready for the question? Very good. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes?
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary Resolution 45-21 passes 9-0. Temporary Resolution 46-21.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate with the county auditor in the general fund 1001 and authorize the mayor to enter into a contract with the Junto Company Ltd. for representation in the matters before the state and federal government. Offered by Mrs. Downhour, seconded by Mr. Stoughton.
Ms. Downhour.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third readings of resolution temporarily numbered 46-21.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 46-21. Ms. Downhour.
I will save it for the next one.
Very good. Discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 9-0. Ms. Downhour.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 46-21.
Second.
Good job. Got it right in there. We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 46-21. Ms. Downhour.
Yes, we had a lengthy conversation regarding this resolution in the finance meeting. It is a resolution to actually approve the engagement of a representative who will serve as an advocate for the city of Lancaster, for the Ohio Executive Branch, the Ohio General Assembly, and in other federal matters. The agreement is for $36,000 to be paid in $3,000 per month increments, and it is a one-year contract.
Thank you, Ms. Downhour. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 46-21 passes 9-0. Are there any further resolutions to come before Lancaster City Council tonight? If not, we'll move on to the reading of ordinances, and as we prepare to do so, let's have a little fun. I hereby relinquish the chair to President Pro Tem Ms. Downhour for the remainder of the meeting. Ms. Downhour, it's yours.
Well, literally sit in the chair.
You want to sit in the
Put her in the chair. Come on.
Oh, boy.
You gotta turn that mic back on.
Had to hit your knees.
Yeah.
Workers' comp already, or last night. Do we have money for that?
Yeah. Okay, the first ordinance is the third reading of temporary ordinance 8-21.
An ordinance to repeal and replace Lancaster Codified Ordinance Part 9, Streets, Utilities, and Public Services Code, Title 5, Other Public Services. Getting tongue-tied, let me read. Can we have some more fun? Okay, sorry. Public Services, Other Public Services, Chapter 937, Waste Removal of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Lancaster. Offered by Mrs. Teener and seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Mrs. Teener.
Madam Pro Tem, I would like to make a motion that council pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 821.
Second.
Any discussion?
I'm going to have Sean come up and speak to this,
Okay.
please.
Good evening again, everyone. Appreciate the ordinance here. Just cleaned up some language, allowing us to increase a little bit of fees at sanitation when you come in. Also straightening up some of the verbiage in regards to bulk pickup, as those were initially, when this was first passed, a lot of those have really increased, and that's kind of went off the ground in a good way. But also with that, there was some limiting verbiage in here where we were not able to charge to the point we needed to charge, because some of these bulk pickups are getting to the amount that we need to be able to charge beyond what the ordinance said. So this will put that back in alignment, allow us to do that, and then allow us to it's a $5 increase at the transfer station for up to 999 pounds.
Mr. Martin.
I just want to clarify a statement. The increase in fee is only at the transfer station.
Correct.
It is not increasing the fees, monthly fee going out to the utility bill. Just
Correct.
a little
Yep.
clearer.
All the other monthly bills are the same. It's increase if you bring 0 to 900, or 1 to 999 pounds to the transfer. Minimum charge now 25 instead of 20. And then, like I said, all changes the bulk, so it takes that 150 cap off. Because we have some of these set outs that are $150 is an absolute steal to have that cleaned up. So we need to be able to appropriately charge.
Okay, any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
And I apologize, I don't call her. This-
No, she still gets the vote.
Oh, I do.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 8-21 passes 9-0. There are no ordinances for second reading. Moving on to first reading of temporary ordinance 9-21.
An ordinance to amend Lancaster Codified Ordinance, Part 1, Administrative Code, Title 5, Administrative Code, Administrative, Chapter 133, Fire Department, Section 133.09, Appointee Age Limitation Waiver of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Lancaster, offered by Mr. Hall and seconded by Mrs. Teener.
Mr. Hall.
One of two, please.
Okay. Are there any other ordinances to come before City Council? Okay, seeing none, do we have any we have no tabled legislation. You sure you want me to finish this?
You're doing great.
Okay. Do we have any unfinished business? Yes, President Bull.
Thank you, Madam Pro Tem. I do want to give report tonight from the salary committee that was convened over the last several weeks. During the 2021 budget meetings in late 2020, the mayor outlined his plan to put a committee together that would look at the non-union pay ranges to ensure that they were in line with other Central Ohio communities as well as with union counterparts in the city of Lancaster. Members of council in those meetings supported the administration's non-union pay increase of 3% for 2021 and also committed to consider any corrective measures that may be needed for non-union, non-management positions in the city as a result of the findings of the committee and study. In January, the mayor asked me to recruit that committee and review the salaries. 5 people joined us, including 3 HR professionals from the Lancaster-Fairfield County area and 2 former city council members, one from Lancaster who's a retired business executive and served on Lancaster City Council, as well as on the Lancaster Council Union Negotiation Committee back in the 80s, and one who is a current attorney and lives in Lancaster and previously served on Powell City Council. These 5 members were joined by Councilwoman Bobbitt, HR Coordinator Gretchen Nyheiser, and myself to round out that committee. The committee met to work out the plan of and scope of work to be completed, which was to review all non-union, non-management pay ranges, and to look at possible ways about going about conducting that review. It was decided that we would utilize the most recent Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission salary study on Central Ohio communities. HR Coordinator Nyheiser provided this more than 200-page document to all participants, as well as current pay ordinances, pay ranges, the past 20 years of raises for union, non-union, and non-union management positions, and position descriptions. As far as methodology, we decided to look at surrounding communities in Central Ohio to which we could potentially lose employees. We also decided that given Lancaster's current size, income ranges, and financial situation, that we wanted to be in the middle of the average in these ranges for salary, not the highest and not the lowest in Central Ohio. I'll just note that one of the comments that's been made in the past was that there were several years where the union received a raise, but that non-union employees did not. That narrative put some in the city under the impression that there were many years throughout history where this occurred. In reality, there were 3 years where this occurred in a 20-year period. One of those years was last year. Those 3 years certainly could have resulted in a gap between union and non-union employees from a compensation standpoint. However, the impression that some, including myself, had was that this was an ongoing and significant issue. The data shows that it was much less of an issue than some had led members of the city and city administration to believe. Armed with all of the required and relevant information, the committee set out individually to do its work with 36 non-union, non-management positions divided between the 5 members. Ms. Bobbitt, Ms. Nyheiser, and myself did not conduct any individual position analysis. Just 2 weeks ago, the committee members reconvened and presented their findings. A presentation of the findings did show that there were some non-union, non-management positions in the city that have a pay range lower than some other communities in Central Ohio. 14 positions were identified as potentially having a lower pay range than other Central Ohio cities. I do not think we are surprised to hear that. The biggest discrepancies occurred in areas of certified building and engineering departments. Ms. Nyheiser confirms that this is one of the areas where she has the most difficulty in recruitment. Additionally, in an attempt for parity, when we looked at union versus non-union positions that may be comparable to one another in the city, one can see that in some cases there was between a 5 and 9% difference in pay depending on the position. As you hear this information, though, In the interest of taking a comprehensive look at the overall study, its methodology, and its findings, there's some nuance here that must be considered. And we have to look at a number of important variables as a part of this study. First, some committee members looked at central Ohio cities that are close in proximity to Lancaster, where we may potentially lose employees, but those cities were more affluent than the city of Lancaster, potentially skewing the average ranges. Some committee members looked at similarly positioned cities to Lancaster financially, like a Reynoldsburg or a Circleville or maybe a Newark. In other words, while the communities reviewed were all central Ohio communities, there was a large disparity in the financial position and condition of those cities reviewed and compared in this study. Further, we were unable to discern in the study what the city's overall compensation philosophy might be. In other words, some cities may have a merit-based system, other cities a step system like ours, where not only do employees receive a step increase each year until they reach the top of the scale, but also may receive a cost of living increase as well. Not knowing the overall philosophy of compensation for comparable cities may have impacted the final results of the study. During the study, it was noted that we have position descriptions in the city that have not been updated in many, many years, in some cases close to 2 decades. We also have position titles that are the same in several departments, but that perform significantly different functions, have different pay ranges, and even different years of experience requirements for hire. Some examples of those include an administrative assistant, executive assistant, and confidential staff and department secretary. This makes it very hard to conduct an apples-to-apples comparison and justify range changes, as it may impact one position in one department with the same title and not the exact same title and position in a different department. It was further noted that in the presentation of findings that the city of Lancaster needs to develop and solidify a philosophy of compensation. How do we want to compensate people? What is fair? Is the step system where you simply get a raise each year just because you have another year on the job the right system? Is the step system and a cost of living adjustment the right system? Should we address parity between position titles, duties, responsibilities, and requirements? I want to note that the committee that we brought together did a fantastic job conducting this study. They did every single thing that we had asked them to do, and they should be commended for their service to the city of Lancaster. Through no fault of their own, though, their work left many more questions than answers in my mind. And I believe that while they did everything we asked them to do, the work remains incomplete. We need more information and a more uniform study of our position titles, position descriptions, pay ranges, and our overall compensation model for all non-union, non-management, and non-union management positions. We need a complete top-to-bottom review. Therefore, it's my recommendation that City Council recommend to the Mayor, Service Safety Director, and HR Coordinator that a full study of all areas listed above be commenced by an outside firm that specializes in these matters. This study should be commenced as soon as possible and completed no later than September 30th of 2021 so that the findings can be considered and any changes that this council desires or changes that the administration would desire to recommend can be considered in the 2022 budget cycle. I want to say again, thank you to Ms. Bobbitt, to Ms. Nyheiser, and to the entire committee that performed so extraordinarily well. I hope City Council will strongly consider this recommendation and ask the administration to contract with a firm to conduct this full top-to-bottom study of our compensation system. We can try to fix this via piecemeal and fix a little here and fix a little there, or we can dream big and be bold and take on the larger challenge, fixing it all at once and for all. Respectfully submitted, David. Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Stoughton.
Can we ask Mr. Rule some questions?
Sure can.
Have you talked to the administration about this yet?
I have.
And Mayor Scheffler, where are you folks on this?
Yes, yeah, we agree. The compensation system in Lancaster, I don't know if I'd even call it a system, and I think David mentioned it as piecemeal. And that's pretty much how it's developed over years. Things move this direction, things move this direction. And, I think his example of the confidential staff secretary in a couple of departments is a good example. When they're not confidential and they're not secretaries, they have other duties. And like my assistant, I believe, is called an executive assistant, who she actually could be a confidential staff secretary more than any of these other people. So it's just gotten all out of alignment. So after President Uhl developed this, Ms. Nyheiser contacted a firm that specializes in this. Crimmins Nelson is their name. They've done work for many cities all around Central Ohio. And just late this afternoon, we got a proposal from them for several options for work somewhere between like $16,000 and $32,000, depending on which option that we selected. So we haven't had time to, I guess, vet that proposal adequately. And I know Council President Uhl also has a copy of it. So, yeah, we believe that it's the right answer and we need to proceed in that line.
Madam Chair, can I have a little latitude to ask a couple more questions?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, well, good. I'm happy to hear that you two have aligned, and I think you have to review the proposal, but, I don't disagree with anything you've said. I mean, I think, Mel, when we talked about this, at budget time, we all kind of expect this to be pretty easy to do, and apparently it's far from easy. And the fact that if they can get it done by, the end of September, so we can put the budget impacts, or the finding impacts into the 22 budget, that would be perfect. And this basically, we're talking about non-union, both management and non-management.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, no, I think that's fantastic.
And the timeline they outlined would have it complete within this time period.
Yeah, I think the proposal was 16 weeks
Yep.
within that timeframe.
All right, and I just want to thank Mel for being a part of the committee. Thank you for leading the committee. Thank you for, the summary today, but I support this.
Give Melody some latitude as well, since she's a
Mrs.
member.
Bobbitt, would you care to comment?
The only comment, I just want to reiterate, I thank the people that were on the committee, because I know they put in a lot of hours, and it wasn't a difficult task, because of all the different titles that we have, so I would like to, move forward. Did they say that they can get it done in a 6 months' time?
Yeah, 16 weeks is what they
16
said they
weeks?
could do it in 16 weeks.
Okay. Yes, Mr. James.
Just one quick question. Does that answer the question of your philosophy of compensation versus step, merit, cost of living, and all that? Will this study address those issues as well?
I suspect they might come back with some recommendations for us.
They just did some recent cities and agencies in the state, as well as other county and cities. Very impressive resume. I've known about this consulting firm for a long time. But, yeah, I think they are very well skilled and can give us some recommendations, not just one thing, but maybe a couple to pick from.
Do we have some sense of the type of recommendations that they make? I mean, do they have a track record of looking at performance-based versus step systems?
I don't know if we can answer that right.
I don't know if we have enough information. They had a long list, pages of references from other cities, all cities in Central Ohio, Chillicothe, Pickerington, it seems like I remember Circleville being on there, so State of Ohio, City of Columbus, so they've got a long resume of cities that they've worked for, other municipalities they've worked for.
President Uhl.
Thank you, Ms. Downhour. Just a couple of quick things that they talk about, what they're going to do. Review and revise position descriptions after several meetings with the client to understand scope and get everything. Conduct a wage survey analysis, internal equity analysis, so that speaks specifically to the union versus non-union, I think, questions that council has. Developing a compensation plan and pay schedule, so they're going to make recommendations in that area, and then finalize all the compensation plans. So they've set this out for 6 months is what it looks like. And as the mayor said, yeah, depending on the option, several different options here that could undertake, the longest taking 8 months. Oh no, those are projects they did, sorry. I'm looking here, try to get the time frame.
I thought it was 16 to 18 weeks.
I think that's right.
Depends on whether we take option 1 or 2.
Yeah.
We're actually recommending to go with the more thorough option to really do a proper job.
And I think that's the right thing, because again, there's just a lot here. And so that full top to bottom thing, I mean, I get it, it's not cheap, but you can see this is also, Mr. Stoughton, I think you're 18 or so. I don't know that this has been done in the last 2 decades.
It has not as long as I've stayed.
Yeah, and so it's time. It's time to get this fixed and right, so that we can be compensating people fairly and equitably, and in a way that's in the best interest both of the employee and of the city.
Okay, anything else? All right, thank you very much. Any further unfinished business? Okay, any new business? I do have new business, if nobody else has any. I would like to make a motion to appoint Don McDaniel as President Pro Tem, given my resignation.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay. Is that a roll call? Can you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. McDaniel,
Thank you.
you will take over those responsibilities.
Just as a note, I'm not going to be here on May 10th, so. First in 6 years, the first council meeting I think I've ever missed, and you're up. There you go.
So where, pray tell, are you going to be, President?
I'm not saying.
It's not going to divulge that information.
This won't be like Fowler, in the
Yeah.
transfer station with you sitting.
Everything will crash.
All right, the next item of new business is I would also like to make a motion to change up the committees, given my resignation. So I would like to appoint the following to the committees for economic development. Mr. McDaniel, still the chair, Mr. Stoughton, and then my replacement will be the third member of that committee. The Finance Committee, Mr. Stoughton will become the chair, Mrs. Bobbitt will remain on the committee, and my replacement will serve as the third person on that committee. IT Telecom, my replacement will become the chair of that committee, and Mr. James and Mr. Schoonover will participate in that committee. And Public Works, Mr. Schoonover will still remain the chairperson, and Mr. James and Mr. Stoughton will serve as the other two members of that committee. I need a second. That was a
Second.
motion. Okay.
Second.
All right, any discussion? Okay, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
All right. Is there any other new business? Okay, I will turn it over to the clerk to announce the scheduled meetings.
Next regular meeting, April 12th at 6:30 PM. At that meeting, we will have a stormwater presentation. The meeting following is April 26th at 6:30 PM. Upcoming committee meetings for the next 30 days. Service, April 2nd, 7:30 AM at the City Hall 1897 Conference Room. Public Works, April 9th, 7:30 AM at the City Hall 1897 Conference Room. Finance, April 12th, 6 PM here in Council Chambers. Water Pollution Control, April 14th at 8 AM at the City Hall 1897 Conference Room. And finally, Law, April 14th at 9:30 AM at the City Hall 1897 Conference Room.
Thank you. Do we have any bills?
We have one for publication of legislation to MNCO payable by paying our credit card PNC. And that is it.
I would like to make a motion to pay the bill.
Second?
All those in favor? Aye. Is there a need for an executive session?
Masterfully done, Madam Chairwoman. And let me just say that on your way out, you've made my dream come true, because I've just always wanted to sit by Mr. Stoughton in a council meeting. And now I got to, so thank you.
That's a bucket list.
All right. So we will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Ms. Downhour, I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Sign your legislation.
Sign your legislation, don't forget.
Why am I messing up?